Welcome. Welcome to Travel with Ketan with me, Ketan Joshi, biker, backpacker, and travel writer. I am the author of the Three Men on Motorcycle series, where with three guys, three friends, me, Adi, and Delzad, we get on our bikes and we travel to various parts of India and talk about our adventures there. This particular series is on my second book, which is called Three Men Ride Again: The Amigos Ride to Spiti. Spiti Valley is, as you may know, the area bordering Ladakh, which is in Himachal Pradesh. And this series has been the story of our ride there. If you have not seen it, do check them out. It's great fun. It's story of our ride of starting from Chandigarh and to all the way to crossing the, crossing the pass into Spiti Valley. And right now we are at a village called Sumdu. So without any further ado, let us start on our trip from Sumdu to Losar. So here we go. Three men ride again. Sumdu to Losar. We woke up bright and early and started the day on a positive note by telling Adi how much he had missed last night and what an absolute fool he was for going to sleep early. An opportunity of a lifetime and you missed it. Loser. We were doing him a favor actually. He became red in the face, which is good for his circulation. He started breathing heavily, which is good for his lungs. He got a free workout without doing anything, all because he had such good friends who were looking out for him. We went to have a bite of breakfast, and Adi saw a repair shop in the village. He was thrilled. Oh, goody! He said, clapping his little hands and jumping up and down in excitement. A repair shop! What fun! Let's change your oil. Let's change your bearings. Let's rejig your shockers. Let's weld our frames. Let's balance our wheels. Clean our air filter. Charge our battery. Switch our seat. And ow! He turned around in irritation because I had slapped his head. What did you do that for? Ow! Delzad also slapped his head. Are you mad? We are not letting a local mechanic in the middle of nowhere touch our bikes. But I wonder if he has petrol, Baba muttered. The nearest petrol pump was at Kaza, and we are hoping to visit Pin Valley, which was before Kaza. As per current plan, we would go to Kaza, fill up, come back to Pin Valley, and again come out and then again go to Kaza. If we could get petrol here, it would save us that trip. Delzad went to the shop and asked that guy if he had petrol to sell. And he did. He pointed to the drums behind him and said, sure, he can fill up our bikes. That's great, Delzad said. But then he looked doubtfully at the drums and asked him, but is the petrol pure? The guy was very offended. Of course it's pure, he said. But are you sure? Del persisted. Are you sure it is pure? Can you guarantee that you have not mixed kerosene in it? Are you sure the rusty piece of shit drums have not released flecks of rust into the petrol? Yes, Adi chimed in, his eyes shining. Will your petrol damage my lovely, lovely bike? Are you a black marketer? Are you a thief? Can you get a character witness? Can you get me a signed affidavit? Can you? The guy was very offended. Because he was a polite hillman, he did not actually kick us on the butt and tell us to fuck off. But he turned his bike on us in a marked manner and indicated that if he had doubt on his petrol, then we could jolly well get lost and leave him alone. What are you doing? I hissed at Delzad. What do you expect him to say? Yes, I actually cut the petrol with kerosene. Hope you don't mind. Don't piss him off, or else we have to go all the way to Kaza to fill petrol. Especially Adi's classic 500 with this ridiculous little thimble of a tank. So we went crawling back to that guy and assured him that we did not mean to doubt his integrity. We are asking just like that, and we are so sorry. And we will be right back with the bikes to fill up. As we are going back, one villager caught me by the arm and croaked at me. Beware! Beware! The iris of March! I was nonplussed. Oh, Bugger! I went. Beware! Beware! The Nala of Maling. Oh, it's Bharti. Oh, hi. Sure. We will look out for it. The whole village seemed to be staggering towards us and intoning, beware! Beware! Even the local cow came to us and shook her horns at us and said, Moo! Ling! Moo! Ling! We filled up and moved out, but the whole village turned out to be much ado about nothing. The whole issue, I mean. The Maling Nala had overflown and screwed the road so many times that the local government had made a new road and bypassed that Maling village altogether. The new road went high over the mountain and left the Maling stream far below and told it to go ahead and do its worst. We could see the village and stream from a height, and I was fervently glad that we did not have to do any complicated rerouting and backtracking, which we would have to do if that Maling had broken its banks and broken the road. We enjoyed a peaceful ride on the highway, enjoying views of the Spiti River and the mountains until we came to the jewel of Spiti, Tabo. Tabo village is home to the amazing Tabo Monastery, which is 1,000 years old. It holds the record for the oldest continually operated Buddhist enclave in India and in the whole Himalayas, in fact. And it is also unique in the sense that it is based in a valley rather than a mountain peak like most monasteries prefer to be. It was built 1,000 years ago by kings of a Tibetan dynasty and was sort of like a branch office of the Tholing monastery in Tibet. It's gone through ups and downs over the centuries. It became rich and powerful at one point and was an important center of commerce and learning. The lamas of the monasteries were also the local leaders and representatives of the Dalai Lama, and so it was a seat of government as well. So the temple was covered in amazing frescoes and artworks on the inside and outside. And the outside, some say, used to be covered with gold. But as the influence of the Tibetan kingdoms faded, the monastery started facing tough times. It was attacked many times by raiders for its gold and riches, by local hill kingdoms, by Ranjit Singh's armies, by British armies, etc. And the influence faded. And after the Tibet takeover, the Chinese have basically destroyed the Toling monastery, and they have been looking at this place very acquisitively and made the monks very nervous. And it got damaged in the massive Kinnaur earthquake of 1975 as well. But it has endured, it has continued, and it is now flourishing. It gained a lot of exposure when the current Dalai Lama came to visit and performed the Kala Chakra ceremony there and announced that he would come and live there after retirement. The Dalai Lama is a great soul and a Nobel Prize winner and a media personality, and so this put Tabo on the map. The tourist traffic grew exponentially, and the Tabo of today is unrecognizable from the Tabo of just a few years back. It has become a thriving town now from the unknown and sleepy place that it was. I am not sure whether it's a good thing or bad, but that's how it is. The Archaeological Survey of India has declared it to be a monument of national importance and is lobbying for it to be declared a UNESCO heritage site, which would be extremely well deserved and get some good money as well. The monastery itself looks like a boring, muddy pile of shit from the outside, but that is intentional. It is designed to look insignificant and uninteresting from the outside to prevent unwelcome attention, and it built like a fort to deal with the attention if it comes. The walls are 3 feet thick and strong enough to hold off any attack. And the inside, it's amazing. The walls are covered in colorful frescoes depicting Buddhist legends, and you could spend hours just entranced by them. It's known as the Ajanta of the Himalayas for the quality of its wall paintings. Apart from the stuff painted on the walls, there are hundreds of thankas, which are paintings on cloth. These thankas are priceless. They would be worth millions for their historical value alone. And once you add the value of the art, The temple is sumptuous with idols of the Buddha in his various avatars. The only problem here is that over the years the frescoes got damaged by water and fading, etc., and needed restoration. Now that it comes under the aegis of the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI decided to do the restoration themselves and did not allow the local people to do it. Normally, this would not be a problem because the ASI is a very good institution and has done sterling work in many places all over India. But unfortunately, here it showed another avatar of a shit eating Sarkari institution, which gives apparently, I don't know if it's true, apparently it gave out contracts to the lowest bidder, who came and utterly fucked up. The fresco is the name of restoration. Whenever he saw that, the painting is damaged, that fellow decided to draw it himself all over the place. And oh my god, he did such a horrible job. The locals were horrified and protested. But the ASI Babu was not bothered. Right? Finally, the locals picked him up and threw that vandal and the Babu and the ASI out of the temple and locked it. And said, if you cannot restore, at least don't damage it any further. Then finally, they got some new Buddhist painters and experts from Nepal and stuff. And now the new restoration is doing better. But you can still see the ham-handed slapdash shit work the earlier did. What a crime shame. I mean, just think about it. It's like painting a moustache on the Mona Lisa. Hey, ASI person in charge of the painting disaster. Fuck you. Rot in hell. We hung out there for a while and then went out to have a cup of tea. A bunch of Indian tourists were admiring our bikes and they started chatting with us. How did you do this? You're saying the roads are so bad ahead. There are no stone, there are no roads only, just stones and muck. I don't know how you guys do this. How will you manage on bikes when our large four wheelers were in so much strife? We just shrugged. We have seen bad roads before. We will manage. And we left Tabo for our next destination, Dhankar. Dhankar Monastery is perched on a spectacular location, right on top of a hillock, a spur about 300 feet above Dhankar village, and it overlooks the confluence of two rivers, the Spiti and the Pin rivers. One of the most spectacular settings for a Gompa. I am telling you, it is something to see. Dang means cliff and Khar means fort. So Dhankar literally means fort on a cliff. What a place. It's an amazing place to see. And Dhankar has got a particular significance for me as a rider because this was where I first sat on a bullet. I had come here with Bharti. Excuse me. Bharti brought me here last time. That's better. We are trialing with public transport, government buses. We had stayed at Tabo for the night and Bharti said we must go to Dhankar. I didn't know the difference between a Dhankar and a bunker. So I just waggled my head. What does I do now? I said, yes dear, of course dear, yes dear, of course dear. Much as I do now. I sat quietly in one corner. Much as I do now. We asked the hotel guy if there's a bus to Dhankar. But there wasn't. He offered to book a taxi for us, but the cost was much beyond our modest backpacker budget. The hotel guy was actually a very nice guy. So after he finished his, then he wanted to help out. So he put us in touch with a group of Swiss tourists staying at the hotel and were planning to visit Dhankar in their own vehicles. And they very kindly agreed to take us along with them. Very nice people they were, I tell you. The group consisted of three guys in a gypsy and three guys on bullets. And they said one guy can ride in a jeep and one guy can be a pillion rider on the bullet. Well, I had just noticed Royal Enfield for the very first time at Nako just the other day. And when I saw a bunch of bikes parked in front of the hotel, I stared at them the way an adolescent boy stares at girls. Hormones start bubbling and idling your brain. And suddenly you find that the creatures you had found high pitched, loud, and irritating are now looking extremely interesting and attractive. The curves, the bumps, the headlights. All I wanted to do is just jump on one and caress it and twist it. Uh, 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 you get it. I developed a serious crush. So I requested a ride on the bullet. Please, please. And a very amused Bharati sat in the gypsy, looking at me indulgently like a mother might look at a little boy looking shyly at a little girl. The Swiss gentleman very kindly agreed to take me double seat, and I sat on a bullet, and that experience changed my life. First of all, I found that the bike starter wasn't working. So he had to push it with his feet until it got a bit of speed and abruptly put it in gear to start. Ah, boom! That seemed to start a considerable bit of interest to an otherwise boring activity. Any fool can press a button or kick a lever to start a bike. But only a bullet will make you jump through hoops just to make it start. It's like making love to a moody woman. You need to spend an awful lot of foreplay to get her engine running. But when she gets into it, she gives you a life ride of a lifetime. The whole concept of travel changed for me in that short ride. And that experience of a ride to Dhankar Monastery and back, well, not back, or to the drop to Dhankar Monastery resulted in my becoming a biker a few years down the line. Actually, you can check out the story in my book, One Man Goes on a Bus, where this whole story is given in detail. Anyway, so riding to Dhankar on my own bullet was like homecoming for me, almost like a pilgrimage. We started riding to a Dhankar and I slowed down a bit looking for the turnoff to the village. And just as I spotted the arch which showed this is the turnoff that goes to the village, these two idiots suddenly decided I was riding too slow and sped off and ran off. Woohoo! Adi whooped. Eat my dust, sucker! And Belzad shouted and left me in a cloud of dust. Hey, stop! I shouted, but they are out of earshot. And the thumping of the engines drowning out my voice. Shit. I tried chasing after them, but they're like excited dogs running faster when their master comes after them. So there, and anyway, there's no chance of me, slow me, catching up with Mr. Perpetual Motion and the Ghost Rider. Cursing under my breath, I came back to the turn-off point and switched off my bike and waited for them. I seemed to be waiting for hours when they finally came back looking for me. What happened? Bike broke down. No, you idiots. We're supposed to turn here. We took the turn to Dhankar. And it's a wonderful ride, a lovely ride, riding up twisty roads all the way up to Dhankar village. It's a good 8 kilometer curly ride up, and we enjoyed it thoroughly, and the irritation of the wait was forgotten. The original Dhankar Gompa is right on top of the escarpment, but it's old and almost ruined now. They have built a new Gompa at a lower level, and that is where most of the day to day worship and the activities happen now. But the old Gompa is still alive and consecrated. So we went up to see the place. Ah, what a place. It's ancient and atmospheric and has faded wall paintings and ancient thanka. The historic shrine of the Buddha is the Vairochana. The original Gompa is supposed to have been built in the 12th century and expanded on in the 17th century. It was in fact the capital of Spiti in the 17th century and was ruled by a leader called the Nono. In fact, it's called the Rao Nono. It sounds like a weird title, but if you think about it, it's very relatable to other Indian titles. It's related to the word Nana, which in Hindi means your maternal grandfather, but in Maharashtra it is still a word for a senior person. Nana Fadnavis was a major prominent Paratha leader of the Maratha Empire and was a major player in the 1857 War of Independence. The whole word is Nono Ra or Ra Nono, which is also related to the Rajput word Rana. And that was the title of the ruler of the Rajasthani states as well. And a lot of Rajasthanis also conquered places in the hills and made it their home. So, far away in the fastnesses of the mountains here, you have got possible links to other parts of Indian civilization. But the really arresting thing here is the view. Oh, Oh, what a view. It's the highest point around and commands a wonderful view of the whole countryside, particularly the confluence of the Spiti and Pin rivers. That landscape is really magical. The mountains are brown and bare, and but here and there the minerals in the rock give it shades of pink and red, and the whole place looks painted. The bright blue sky, that special blue you get only in the mountains of Tibet Plateau. Oh, what a blue! That white cottony clouds, the brown and painted mountains, rare patches of green, and those two mighty rivers. That's a view you won't forget in a hurry. We took in that scene in silence for a long time and had to really tear ourselves away. Our planned stop for the night was where we were looking at the valley of the river Pin. Me and Bharti had missed it last time. Bharti had wanted to take me there last time. That's better. But we couldn't manage it. Bus schedule and stuff. So I really wanted to see the place. The Pin Valley is now a national park. It's part of the Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve and is a sanctuary for the Himalayan ibex and the snow leopard and birds like the Himalayan snowcock, the chukar partridge, snow finch, and all those various mountainy birds. It's supposed to be really beautiful, and I was keen to see it and hopefully stay a day there. We took the turn off for Pin Village, crossed the bridge over the Spiti River, and we are planning to reach Mud Village and stay there for the night. The road becomes even more scenic once you leave the highway, and we are really enjoying that ride. We're following the Pin River now, and the road was even more deserted than the highway. We'll soon be in mud, I thought. And how right I was. Unfortunately, it was the wrong kind of mud. It was actual mud. Tons and tons of mud. The whole road was blocked, not by a landslide, but a mudslide. Tons and tons of black, sticky, smelly mud had emerged from somewhere and had completely blocked the road. It looked really horrible, like industrial effluent. Only there was no industry around for hundreds of miles. This was some primeval sludge, some prehistoric ooze which had been lying dormant for centuries and had come out of the ground for some reason. Maybe it was decomposed dinosaurs or something, but it smelled quite nasty and was polluting the water of the pin as well. All the traffic for mud had stopped here. There's no way anything was going around that. Trucks, cars, buses, all had stopped here. The villagers who had to go across were clambering across the mud or sand or somebody going somehow getting across. But there was no way three bikes were going over. We looked at it in shock. What shit luck, I said. But Baba shook it. This is not shit luck. This is good luck. Real shit luck is those guys who reach mud and then this landslide came down to cut them off. They are completely stuck. We can just turn around and go back and no harm done. Well, that's true. There was no point in hanging around there. So we turned around and crossed the Spiti again and went off towards Kaza. The highway continued along the banks of Spiti and the scenery kept getting better and better. The banks of Spiti are lined with gigantic columns of dried mud, where a prehistoric water body had dried up, leaving this giant basin behind. The columns were gigantic and regularly placed, and they seemed like pillars of some great temple, or perhaps an invading army of giant soldiers turned into stone by some powerful wizard. I was dismayed to see that the government was carrying out reforestation projects here. Or just forestation, as you say, as there was no forest to reforest. What a damn stupid idea. If you grow trees here, they will attract rainfall, and rainfall will turn the entire place, which is essentially just dried mud, into a gigantic pile of sludge. We are already seeing it in Ladakh, where just started getting rainfall, much to their consternation, and has caused immense damage in the form of floods and mudslides and landslides. The government should focus on reforesting the areas which were once green and have been now deforested and fully fucked, like the areas on the other side of the mountain, in the hills of Shimla, Manali, etc. Those hills have literally been clean shaven, screwed almost beyond repair. But no, the money has been allocated to this area, and so will be spent only in this area. And maybe the percentage goes, idiots. Misguided government work is the worst thing because those guys are like bulls with blinkers and will just keep plodding on and on without taking stock of the ill effects that they are causing. We also passed a stud farm created by the Animal Husbandry Department, which is great. The horses of Spiti region are apparently famous. But there didn't seem to be any horses inside. Maybe they're all inside a barn or something. Or maybe there were no horses. The budget extended only to the sign and they are not enough to actually buy horses. Kaza has a petrol pump, and so we went to fill up bikes there. I was very amused to see the sign at the pump. They had proudly put up a sign. World's highest retail outlet. 12,270 feet or 3,740 meters above sea level. Leh was 3,500 meters. So Kaza had them actually beat by 300 meters. We took photos also with that sign for posterity. So the question was, what to do now? We had saved a day since the Pin Valley plan had not worked out. Should we stay in Kaza? We looked around, it didn't look very attractive and perpetual motion, perpetual motion, perpetual motion, perpetual motion. We can go on to Key, I said. Who's Key? Whiskey? Deldar said, licking his lips. Or Gibber, I said. I'm not gibbering, Adi said indignantly. I just asked whose key are you referring to when you accuse me of gibbering? You think I lost my keys? Well, I haven't. I just dropped them for a minute and then I picked them again. You're all mean, mean, mean. There's silence for a second. And Deldar said plaintively, I thought we were going to have whiskey. Ah! Let's start again. We can go across the river to a Gompa called Ki Gompa and visit a village called Kibar. Ah, so no whiskey. Will you shut up about that whiskey? But what is there at Kibar? Adi asked. Well, it's a nice village with a small Gompa and there's a nice valley. But it's almost very famous as being a trekking spot. People trek to Ladakh from there. And also we can do some local day treks. And at Ki, it's a Gompa, it's a big Gompa, big monastery. I could see that both options didn't really appeal to either of them. The idea of actually getting off the bike and walking was totally foreign to them. And we had seen two Gopas already today and they are clearly Gopad out. Will there be tandoori chicken there? Deldar asked suddenly. What? Ah, I was taken aback. Tandoori chicken? No, I wouldn't think so. They might have dal and rice and veggies and maybe thuppa, the soup noodle thing. Deldar bowed his head and thought. So more monasteries. Or trekking. And no tandoori. After thinking for a while, he asked, what is the closest place to have tandoori chicken? I don't know. Probably Manali? Then let's leave for Manali, he declared. Let's leave right now. Let's cover as much distance as we can. Move it, move it, move it. But what about Kimmer and Key? With all respect, all Gompas look quite similar to me. There is no great difference, and we have seen enough of them. I can live without seeing Gompas for some time. I am full to the Plimsoll line with them. But you know what I'm not full of? You know what is lacking in my life? You know what my tongue is slobbering for? Tandoori! I want tandoori! I, I took a step back and seeing the naked hunger in his eyes. He looked like the prospector who went nuts and tried to eat Charlie Chaplin in the gold rush. He was drooling and dribbling, and his eyes were twitching wildly, and his hands were clenching and unclenching, and he was sweating. Clearly, he was going through severe withdrawal symptoms. Tandoori! 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 He started screaming and foaming at the mouth and beating his helmet with his hands and jumping up and down. Tandoori! 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 All right. I said, here, relax, relax. We will ride towards Manali. So we kicked our bikes and started riding. Our destination for the night was Losar, the last village before Kunzum Pass, which separated the Spiti region from the Laol region. We inquired at Kaza, and local that said Losar is just 40-50 kilometers and it should be a breeze to reach there. It was already late afternoon, almost evening. It should be no problem. We should have learned from that Pangi Valley episode not to trust the locals. Locals live in a different reality altogether. The road went on in trackless waste. There was no tarmac, and we were on a dirt road throwing up clouds of dust on the guy behind. Colder and colder. And finally, I couldn't take it. I stopped. What happened? Deldad asked, with my teeth are chattering too much to answer him. Wordlessly, I opened my saddlebag and pulled out all the woolens I could find and put them on. And then we continued. There was no one around for miles. Luckily, the road was still following the Spiti, otherwise, we would have been hopelessly lost. It became totally dark, but we continued riding grimly along. I normally don't like riding in the dark because I am a very conservative rider and prefer to see where I am going. And so I always slow down drastically in the dark. In the daytime, I am Ayrton Senna, but after dark, I am Mr. Bean. The other two were concerned that I should be left behind, so they rode behind me. But since they were so cold and numb, I had no room in my head for fear. I just wanted to find a nice warm room to get into, and so I zoomed along at a rate of knots. Delzad and Adi were very impressed. I wanted to stop the bike and pat you on the back, he told me later. You're riding amazingly and keeping up a pace which was difficult to even keep up with. Though I was cold, the night ride was amazing. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Riding through the utter darkness on an unknown road towards an unknown destination, the cold wind rushing by me, no sound except our engines rumbling, no sight except what was revealed in our headlights. That whole experience was surreal. I suddenly realized what our Delhi friend had been talking about when he told us that he loved riding in the dark. That ride seemed to go on for a very long time. Until finally we came to the village of Losar. Unfortunately, the power was out, so the whole village was in the dark. After checking out a few hotels, we hit the jackpot. A hotel with a generator large enough to heat water for a shower. We checked into the hotel and asked for a double room with an extra bed as usual because it's cheaper than taking two rooms. But either that hotel guy was too lazy to drag out a mattress for us, or Adi tipped him in the wink. But the hotel guy gave us two rooms for the price of one. These two would take one room and I would take one. Now you can fart in solitude, you bastard, they said. But I heard them whispering into each other behind my back. Finally, we can be alone, my darling. Adi whispered to Delzad. Yes, privacy, yippee! Delzad whispered back, clutching his hand tightly. After a long, luxurious shower, we went for dinner. Yes, we showered alone. What a stupid question. That hotel also had a restaurant attached. It was great. Tandoori! Delzad screamed as soon as he entered the restaurant. I want tandoori chicken! But there's no tandoori available. A fact which broke Baba's heart. In fact, there's no chicken of any kind. In fact, there were no non-vegetarian items available at all. The only available item was veg noodle and eggs. Baba sighed mightily and shed a quiet tear, but then polished off several plates of that foul mug. I couldn't even finish half of mine. But Baba was waving at the waiter and pointing at his empty plate and shouting, Encore! Encore! Suddenly the door crashed open and a party of Sardarjis came in, ionizing the air with oaths and energy. The head Sardarji saw Adi sitting there. Adi was wearing a buff around his long hair and it looked like a turban. And with that and his long beard, they thought he was Sardarji as well. And they're very happy. Oh, bale bale. And they came and shook hands and greeted him in Punjabi. Oh ji, Badshah, Sat Shri Akal ji. Adi didn't understand a word, but tilted his head gravely, like a royal personage greeting his subjects. Oji Sadaji, they are saying there is no non-veg in this hotel. It is terrible. It is a disaster. It is unthinkable. The Sadaji vented his frustration. You are right, shouted Delzad, banging his fist on the table. It's a bloody outrage. There is no tandoori. Burn the place down. Check the fatte! All the Sardars screamed and drew their swords. And the restaurant owner screamed in terror and ran away into the darkness. And all the Sardars ran after him, shouting, Balle balle! Kukkad, 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 kukkad! We heard them giving cheers and shouting, At least give us paneer! Until the sound were too faint to hear. Should I ask the Sardarjis if they had any whiskey? Baba mumbled as he went off to that's it. Stay tuned for the next episode. And obviously, if you have not done so, please subscribe and ring the bell icon thingy. And keep reading. Three men ride again. Cheers.